無常人人未明法。百千語難遭遇。が根検問直十字。願下如来真実義。無常人人未明法。百千万難遭遇。が根検問直十字。願来真実義。無常人人未明法。百千万語難遭遇。が根検問直十字。願下如来真実義。Let me say some things about the Bodaisatta-Shishoho in English. Most of the times I'm translating ad hoc from the original Japanese, but let me read the Nishijima translation that we have in the library in Antaiji and also that can be found on the internet first. Nishijima translates Bodaisatta-Shishoho as 4 elements of a bodhisattva's social relations. First is free giving, or dāna, or in Japanese, fuse. Second is kind speech. And as I explained last month, actually, kind speech is also a form of dāna, free giving. Third is helpful conduct. Fourth is cooperation. And you could argue that all of these are manifestations of the first one, dāna. Free giving means not being greedy. Not being greedy means not coveting. I think last time I spoke about currying favor. Not coveting means, in everyday language, not courting favor. Even if we rule the 4 continents, if we want to bestow the teaching of the right truth, we simply must not be greedy. And I think this was where I stopped last month. It continues like this. That might mean, for example, donating treasures that are to be thrown away to people we do not know. Donating treasures that are to be thrown away to people we do not know. Antaiji receives a lot of donations from people connected to the temple, even things that are prohibited by the precepts like fish and meat and alcohol, sometimes financial donations. But it happens from time to time that people also send stuff where, for example, the expiry date is over. And sometimes when I was still the abbot at Antaiji, sometimes I got the feeling that people didn't send it so much because they thought this is exactly what Antaiji needs. This is exactly what they will be happy about, but more to get rid of something that they thought they didn't need anymore. So they didn't want to trash it in the garbage, so they sent it to Antaiji in the hope that people in Antaiji can use it. And of course, when you're at the receiving end of this, you try to receive everything with gratefulness and try to make the best of it. And just because the expiry date has perished, it doesn't mean you can't eat it anymore. So usually in Antaiji, we try to make the best use of this. But I remember once in a party that somebody filled his glass with some kind of juice and drank half of it, but then he decided he didn't like the juice and he offered it to somebody else. Hey, do you want to drink this juice? And in that case, of course, if you are the one practicing this kind of free giving, you should ask yourself, is this really free giving, or am I just trying to throw something away and just disguising it as a form of dāna? So I think what is meant here with a treasure to be thrown away doesn't mean that something that's only garbage for you. Of course, that can also be the case, that something you don't need something anymore, a jacket, a pair of trousers, you want to throw it away, but sometimes there might be a person that needs this. So of course there can be cases like that, that something that is garbage for you is still a treasure for another person. That can happen. But I think what Dogen Zenji means here is, especially connected to the phrase before, you shouldn't court favor. Free giving means to not court favor. And in this sentence, he speaks about a person you don't know, people we do not know. So when you give something or you do a favor to somebody that you do know, what is happening actually is, well, in Japanese, you would talk about en, a karmic connection. Or on. On means a favor that you do or a favor that somebody receives. And especially in East Asia, but probably everywhere in the world, the idea is if you receive a favor, at one point you should return a favor. If somebody does something for you, then you will feel the obligation to eventually do something for them. So even if you don't do it intentionally, that's often something that's motivating us to give something to somebody. And often we make it pretty clear this is something that's really important to me, but I give it to you. Or this is something that I do especially for you. And the problem with this is, of course, again, we are trying to court favor. It's more like a business transaction. I do something for you, but please don't forget that I did this favor for you. Don't forget it. But if you do something for a complete stranger, you can't even be sure that you meet this person ever again. Probably this is the only time you meet this person. This person will never, ever return this favor to you because you're never meeting them again. That's like complete letting go. It's like throwing something away. But not because it's garbage, but because there's no expectancy that this favor will ever be returned. But that Dogen Zenji says here, that's true free giving. There's no, how do you say? Nothing attached. Threads attached? I forgot the English expression, but I think there's a expression that there's something attached to something that you give to a present. And the point Dogen Zenji makes is there shouldn't be any threads, any lines, invisible threads attached to the gifts that you give to others. When we offer flowers from distant mountains to the Tathagata, and when we donate treasures accumulated in our past life to living beings, whether the gift is dharma or material objects, in each case, we are originally endowed with the virtue that accompanies free giving. So these flowers from distant mountains might refer to some passage of the sutras. I'm not quite sure what Dogen Zenji is referring there to, but even today, in Antaiji as well as other temples, there are always flowers besides the Buddha on the altar. We donate treasures accumulated in our past life. So in this life, we are all born in different households with different parents, with different, how do you say, appearance, with different intellectual capabilities. Some of us have a good fate, destiny, others not so good. Where does this difference come from? Although we're all born human, how come that we lead so different lives? And some people, they work hard for their whole life and they still stay poor, while others hardly work at all and they have lots of money. Where does this difference come from? Well, one explanation that's often used in Buddhism is it's the karma of past lives. So basically, what you have in this life is a result of past karma. Could also say, well, it's actually not, they are not the fruits of your, how do you say, effort in this life. So you received this because of past lives. Why don't you share it? Why don't you share it with others? And as I explained last month, it's not only about material objects. Sharing the Dharma, sharing a smile, just saying Ohayo in the morning or Otsukare-sama after Samu. These are all also forms of sharing. In each case, we are originally endowed with the virtue that accompanies free giving. And the virtue that accompanies free giving is exactly that what Sawaki Roshi means when he says Zazen is good for nothing. The Zazen that is 100% fuse of your body and mind. If you let go of your body and mind, if Zazen is a manifestation of free giving, that Zazen is good for nothing, and that's the highest virtue. If you practice Zazen that's good for something, it's not free giving anymore. The highest virtue is the virtue of letting go, of not expecting any reward for what you do. There is a Buddhist principle that even if things are not our own, this does not hinder our free giving. That sounds strange. Of course, you can give things that belong to you, but how can you give something that belongs to somebody else? That would mean to steal those things from somebody else. Of course, there are stories like Robin Hood, who took from those who have already too much and gave it to those who didn't have enough. And you could argue that Robin Hood, in a way, practiced free giving, but at least from the perspective of the rich, from whom Robin Hood stole, they would say, well, that's not free giving. You're stealing from us. So it sounds a little bit strange that you can even give things that don't belong to you. But from the perspective of Buddhism, the question would be, well, but then what belongs to you? For example, these glasses that I'm wearing, they belong to me. Or the raksu, that's my raksu. But it's a raksu that I received in Antaiji. It's not my raksu. These glasses I bought by myself in a 100 yen store, but the 100 yen I probably got during takuhatsu. So in a way, you could say that these glasses are also a donation. What belongs to me? Well, at the end of the day, you could say this body, that's me, that belongs to me. But even this body you received from your parents, it was nourished by what you receive from heaven and earth. It was also nourished by the meat that's donated to Antaiji. So also living beings had to die for this body to exist. Can I really call this my body? It's also something that I received. And even the mind, my mind, influenced by my parents, by my teachers in school, by my teachers in Antaiji, by a lot of things. So actually there's nothing that I can truly call my own. And it's this illusion. No, it's my glasses, my body, my mind. This illusion that keeps us from wanting to share it. Why should I share something that belongs to me? These people should also work so that they can afford 100 yen glasses. It's this illusion that I did a lot of work. I earned this. I earned it hard. No, no, it was all given to you. It was all given to you. How can you be so stingy? Is this an English word? How can you be so attached to it? So in a way, we could rephrase this sentence. There's a principle that even if things are not our own, we could, of course, that's a completely correct translation of the Japanese original, but we could also rephrase it as exactly because nothing is our own. Nothing, really nothing belongs to us. And once we realize that, there's nothing that hinders us to share it with others. And only because we think that some things belong to us and others belong to others, that's why we don't want to share. Because we think what I give to you is something that I lose and you win. But in the first place, what really belongs to me or you in the first place? Anyway, let's go further. And a gift is not to be hated for its small value, but its effect should be real. This reminded me of the story in the New Testament where Jesus and his disciples visited the temple in Jerusalem, I think, and there was a rich man who donated a lot and said, thank you, God, that you made me such a rich person and not such a wretched, poor creature like that one there in the back. And the poor woman in the back, she gave her last 2 pennies and said, I'm sorry, God, but that's all I can give. I think there was a story something like this, maybe a little bit different, but I think more or less like this. And Jesus asked his students later, what do you think? Which of these 2 donations were more pleasing to God, so to speak? If you were in the position of God, which donation would make you more happy. Those of you who practiced takuhatsu, formal begging in Antaiji, or maybe some of you will do in the future, will also realize, of course, you're happy when people give you like 1,000 yen, a 1,000 yen bill. Wow, there's a 1,000 yen bill. But what is much more important is the attitude with which people meet you when you stand there on the street. I think it's much more rewarding to get in touch with the attitude of some people that really have this spirit of free giving. And when you witness that, it has nothing to do with the amount they give you. It has nothing to do with the amount. But let's proceed further. The next sentence, I think, is one of the most important in this section. It reads, "When we leave the truth to the truth, we attain the truth." When we attain the truth inevitably continues to be left to the truth. The word that is translated as truth here in Japanese is do, or in Chinese Dao, and that can mean way, path, truth. It can also stand for the enlightenment of a Buddha, awakening. But let's work with a word that Nishijima is using here, truth. What does it mean to leave the truth to the truth and thus attain the truth? I think it's easiest to understand to think from the opposite side. What do we usually do? We usually say, well, that's my truth. Or when we talk about the way, that's my way of doing it. You might have your way, but this is my way. Or that's my truth. You might have a different opinion, but that's the way I see it, and the way I see it is the true way. And you can see everywhere in the world what is happening. People are losing the truth because they claim it. That's my truth. That's my way. And that's exactly the way you lose the truth. You lose the way. Real truth can only be attained when you don't label it as my or your truth. The true way is not my way or your way. You attain the true way when you let go of ideas like it's mine or yours. When you attain the truth, when you attain the way, without exception, it's always a way that you let go, that you can never label as your own. How does he say it? When we attain the truth inevitably continues to be left to the truth. And one thing I was reminded here is the Gakudo Yojinshu, a text by Dogen. And there it's 10 points that you need to be aware of when practicing the way. And in point 9, I'm not quite sure if this is also the translation by Nishijima, maybe. Point 9 is direct yourself at the truth and practice it. So when you want to practice Zen, you should aim at the way, at the truth. And in this text he says, the Buddhist truth, and Buddhist truth can also be translated as the Buddha way, the Buddhist truth, exists under the foot of every human being. You're already standing right in the midst of the Buddha way. And then Dogen Zenji says something interesting. When a person is caught by the truth, they can clearly realize the moment of the present. And the word that's translated as caught here can also mean, or a more literal translation would be obstructed. When you are obstructed by the truth, when the truth comes in your way. When I translate it into German, I usually translate truth as way or Weg in German, and I say, wenn dir der Weg in den Weg kommt, which means when the way gets into your way. When the way gets into your way, you can clearly realize the moment of the present. It's kind of interesting that Dogen Zenji doesn't say that once all of the obstacles disappear, once nothing obstructs you anymore, then you realize the moment of the present. He doesn't say that. He says when the way obstructs you, when the way gets into your way. And why is that? Because then the way is not my way anymore. As long as you think it's my way, I do it my way, this is my truth, there's nothing that blocks you. But once Buddhist awakening blocks this perspective, the true way gets into your way, that's when you wake up. And you hopefully become able to let this my way, my truth drop. It becomes the way. And in the Gakudo Yoshinshu, Dogen Zenji continues with when a person is caught by enlightenment. And again, more literal would be when a person is obstructed by enlightenment. Enlightenment is something that gets into your way, that obstructs you. When a person is obstructed by enlightenment, they can perfectly realize themselves as just a person. Okay, so much for now in English. I want to continue with the Japanese. Let me continue a little bit in English. When possessions are left to be possessions, possessions inevitably turn into gifts. The original word for possession in Japanese is takara, which means a treasure, or in this case, any kind of material thing. And I think the point here is actually these treasures, these things, they don't belong to anybody, or the other way around, they belong to everything. There is no such thing as a possession. And when you realize that, you leave the thing to itself, you leave the treasure to itself, then it becomes a gift. It becomes an expression of dāna. For example, in Antaiji, well, it's pretty clear that, for example, the rice fields, tambo, they belong to everybody. They're everybody's tambo. The hatake, the vegetables fields, they are everybody's vegetables fields. They are Antaiji's vegetables fields. But, sorry, the idea, of course, is that everybody should profit from the rice and the vegetables that grow in these fields. Everybody who comes, or if there's somebody who is hungry, has nothing to eat, of course, people in Antaiji would share this with whomever needs it. And in Antaiji, one idea of not using chemicals is also that not only human beings should profit from the tambo, but the insects that live there, the worms that plow the soil, they should also enjoy that space. The space belongs to the insects, the worms, to everybody. It's part of nature. We have only, how do you say, borrowed it from nature for a certain time, being able to plow it and share the treasures that grow in the tambo or in the hatake. But even in Antaiji, funnily, it happens that, for example, often in spring, the responsibilities change. And the person that was last year responsible for the hatake, this year is responsible for tambo, or the other way around. The guy who was responsible for the rice field now cares for the vegetable fields. And interestingly, the person that thought about nothing but the hatake and always said, I need more people during Samu for the hatake. Why does the tambo person get so many people and I don't get enough people? The moment he is in charge of the tambo, he wants all the people in the tambo and the other way around. So even in Antaiji, although everybody's eating the same rice from the same tambo and the same vegetables, you have this kind of ego idea. It's my hatake, it's my tambo. I need more people. Even if it all ends up in the same pot in the kitchen. Interestingly. And of course, the positive factor of that is if you think it's my job, my responsibility, a lot of the time you're willing to give more. So when you say it's my tambo, then even on a hosan, you will go there and look if the rice is growing, while you think, well, it's not my tambo, it's nothing, it doesn't belong to me, I'm not attached to either hatake or tambo, then probably the vegetables won't grow. So, of course, it's also important to feel this relation. This is connected to me. But of course, the idea is you do feel this relation not only to a part and say, this is my responsibility, it belongs to me, but rather you feel connected to the whole. And the tambo guy also shares the perspective of the hatake guy and the other way around. And they also think about the tenzo, and the tenzo thinks about everybody who wants to eat. So I think that's the point here. Possessions are left to the possessions, or the hatake is left to the hatake. You don't call it my hatake, my tambo. About the tools in the blue barn, of course, it's the same. There's no. Also happened that sometimes people with their own money buy tools because they are aware that Antaiji doesn't have so much money, so they donate. And I put it in quotation marks. They donate the money to buy a certain tool that they need for Samu. And it's a donation, but they can't forget that they donated that tool. And sometimes they say, well, this tool shouldn't be touched by anybody but me because it's an important tool. And of course, also I can understand that way of thinking, because sometimes people in Antaiji don't really treat the tools with the necessary respect. And that's a problem. You should really treat the tools that are in the barn. And it has nothing to do if you paid for them or if you didn't pay for them. You should really treat them with respect. But unfortunately, it often happens that we don't treat it with respect unless we paid for it. And only when people paid for something, then they start to treat it with respect. But yeah, leave the possession to the possession means to look at the hammer. What is this hammer good for? What is it needed for? How does it need to be treated? How about the shovel? And the shovel that I took in the morning to work, where is it now? Often happens that people leave the shovel somewhere in the hatake because it's not my shovel, it's not my hatake. So responsibility is also part of that job. But yeah, treat the shovel as a shovel that belongs to the whole universe. And the fact that it belongs to the whole universe doesn't mean that you wouldn't have responsibility for it, but the other way around. It belongs to the whole universe. I'm responsible towards the whole universe to return this shovel in the best condition possible. We give ourselves to ourselves, and we give the external world to the external world. The word that Nishijima translates as external world here can also mean the others or the other person. So give yourself to yourself means don't pretend to be somebody else. Also, we don't practice Zazen to try to become somebody else. Become yourself. Accept yourself as the person that you are. That means free giving to yourself. You don't have to be a different person. Don't pretend to be a different person. It's not the aim of Zazen to turn you into somebody who you are not. Just be who you are. That's a way of free giving towards yourself and also towards the others. And the same with the others. It wouldn't be an act of free giving to try to model them according to your idea, as often parents do with their children. They want to raise them so that they grow into those models that they have for their children. That's not a way of free giving. Allow your children to grow into the persons that they are and not to grow into the persons that you would like them to be. And of course, the same in the Sangha. Allow people to be the people that they are and not to be the people that you would like them to be. That's free giving. The direct and indirect influences of this giving pervade far into heavens above and through the human world, even reaching the wise and the sacred who have experienced the effect. I think he talks here about the arahants or arhats, completely enlightened beings. So the act of letting go is like throwing a It's like throwing a small pebble in a lake, but the waves, even small, even if it's only small waves, they will never stop. They reach even the other shore of the lake. The act of letting go pervades the whole universe. Even completely enlightened arhats are touched by that. The reason is that in becoming giver and receiver, the subject and object of giving are connected. This is why the Buddha says, when a person who gives comes into an assembly, others admire that person from the beginning. Remember, the mind of such a person is tacitly understood. I remember from my time at Antaiji that time and again there were such people who sometimes I had the feeling that they almost like manifestations of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva. Maybe Avalokiteshvara sent them to Antaiji to help me. People that didn't seem to think about themselves at all. They were just giving. They were just giving. And when such a person enters the assembly, everybody's eyes are turned on them. I need to get some water soon, but let me finish with the English first. Everybody's eyes are turned on them because although it's such a small thing to just let go of yourself, it sounds like a small step, but it's exactly that step that most of us are reluctant to take. That's why we're so impressed when we see an example of somebody taking this step. And later, there are stories of somebody who helped a small bird or a turtle. And even centuries afterwards, people are still telling these stories. Somebody who helped a bird just for the sake of the bird. Okay, what comes after this? So we should freely give even a single word or a single verse of Dharma, and it will become a good seed in this life and in other lives. We will sprout a good root in this age and in other ages. Here he's talking about, well, good karma, creating good karma. Whatever you say or do, it will create good karma and it will have effects in your life now or maybe in future lives. And of course, I think I don't need to say it again, but I say it again. That's not the reason why you should give. You shouldn't give in the hope that you will get something in return in this life or in the next life. Dogen Zenji here says, it's going to happen because everything in the universe is connected. Everything you do for somebody else, you're not doing for somebody else. You're doing it for yourself because you're not separate from them. But that's not the reason why you do it. You completely forget about this idea. Eventually, it's going to return to me. No. And even if you would never profit from it again, you give a treasure to a complete stranger that you're never going to meet again. You give. And that's what's called fuse, dāna, letting go. So if you have questions in English, you're welcome to ask or share anything that you would like to share.
すみません。ラウラです。ちょっと、今、浜田さんのことで質問があります。この証言は、is this なんか testimony? So, just because I want to understand the question correctly, it felt important that, 座禅はお布施のことは、but not as an offering for なんか、仏様 I just want to make sure I understand correctly. すいません。
So you're asking for the meaning of the word Shogen?
Dogen, yes, also, yes.
Shogen means expression.
すいません。
Expression. So maybe Hamada-san was asking what I want to express with Zazen is a form of dāna. I'm not quite sure, but basically my answer is Zazen, in my understanding and in the words of Dogen, means to let go of your body and mind and throw them into the house of Buddha. Of course, it would be strange to say, I'm doing Zazen for the Buddha or I'm doing this for the whole world. But for me, dāna means complete letting go. And Zazen means exactly that. You let body and mind go, you let completely go of yourself. You don't hope for any enlightenment in the future. So in that sense, I think you can say that Zazen is the purest form of dāna, of letting go. But yeah, Japanese Hyogen means expression, or Hyogen Sulu means to express something. So you could say that Zazen is also an expression of the spirit of dāna. The spirit of dāna expresses itself in zazen, through zazen. Shūjō muhen seigan no onno mujin seigan omon muyo seigan gaku無常誓願衆生無変誓願の煩悩無尽誓願法門無量誓願学仏道無常誓願上無常無変誓願道煩悩無尽誓願断法門無量誓願学仏道無常誓願上ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。